History. The Scarborough Bluffs previously extended further along the coast of Lake Ontario, but its western fringe was leveled by explosives to make way for urban development. The French gave the name Les Grands Ecorres, or tall points on the shore, to the cliffs. In the 1788 Plan of Toronto by Alexander Aitken, the bluffs were simply known as the High Lands. They became known as the Scarborough Highlands in 1793, named after Scarborough, North Yorkshire. This name was chosen by Elizabeth Simcoe, who was the wife of the first Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada, John Graves Simcoe. The escarpment along Lake Ontario reminded Elizabeth Simcoe of the limestone cliffs in her hometown. In her diary, she wrote, "The shore is extremely bold and has the appearance of chalk cliffs, but I believe they are only white sand. They appeared so well that we talked of building a summer residence there and calling it Scarborough." The name was later given to the entire township in 1796. In time, the cliffs became known as the Bluffs. A stylized version of the Bluffs was incorporated into the design of the official flag of the former city of Scarborough. The Scarborough Bluffs formerly extended further west along the coastline of Lake Ontario towards the Toronto harbor, but extensive areas along the western fringe were leveled by the use of explosives for the implementation of primarily industrial and some residential urban development. Even the existing formation has and continues to shrink considerably decade after decade due to consistent and dramatic erosion. The Bluffs has become a community meeting place for people of all ages. It features various recreational hiking and walking trails, as well as picnic tables, fire pits, places to pitch a tent, parking lots, a restaurant, and a large marina with a boating club. Parks. See also, List of Toronto parks. View from atop the Scarborough Bluffs at Bluffers Park. The Bluffers Park Yacht Club is visible to the left. A number of city parks are located along the bluffs from Victoria Park Avenue to Rouge River. Most are located on the top of the bluffs, but some are located at the base along the shoreline with Lake Ontario. Development of parkland began with the then borough of Scarborough prior to 1960, while some remained in private hands. The land that makes up Cathedral Bluffs Park was originally owned by Sisters of St. Joseph, who later sold it to developers, who left the area near the edge of the bluffs as parkland. The land was later acquired by TRCA in 1960. Cudia Park and Scarborough Heights Park were parks that were acquired by Metro Toronto in 1960 from Scarborough, and later transferred to TRCA. From 1960 to 1978, the parks were acquired by the TRCA, which developed into today's current parks. Sylvan Park was acquired by Metro Toronto in 1966, and later transferred to the TRCA. Rosetta McLean Gardens was another property acquired in 1959 by Metro Toronto from Robert Watson McLean. However, it did not become a park until 1977, when it was transferred to the TRCA. Most parks do not have direct access to Lake Ontario, such as Scarborough Crescent Park. Located on Cecil Crescent and due west of Bluffers Park, the park is located on top of bluffs with no access to the water. It was formerly known as Scarborough Bluffs Park before the municipal government renamed it as Scarborough Crescent Park to discourage users from attempting to climb down from the location. One of the only park along the bluffs that has direct access to the lake is Bluffers Park. It features a sandy beach and man-made berms that provide views of both the bluffs and the lake. Land was acquired by TRCA from Borough of Scarborough in 1960 and opened as a park in 1975. Port Union Waterfront Park is another park that features breakwaters to protect its shoreline. Breakwaters are also found between Sylvan and Cudia Park. Berms and infill were also added to create waterfront area at East Point Park. Issues: erosion. Erosion is a major issue in the preservation of the Scarborough Bluffs. The Scarborough Bluffs have been eroding at a rapid rate since residences have been built on the lake bluff tops. The million-dollar views have been prime real estate since the 1940s. The desire for a beautiful lakeside view and an affluent lifestyle led to a real estate boom along the bluffs. This resulted in a direct correlation of the accelerating rate of erosion. The eroding bluffs have resulted in damaged private property and the need for public assets to be spent on repairs and corrective action. In summer 2008, chunks of the bluffs had eroded to the point that 1/4 of a cottage that actor and comedian Billy Van once owned was left hanging on the cliff. The cottage was deemed a safety hazard by Toronto city officials as a result. To combat erosion, boulders acting as armor, rocks, and trees were placed at the base. However, to place these rocks and trees, a beach must be created to allow trucks to access the cliff base, which would involve leveling parts of the bluffs, such as the aforementioned Bluffers Park. The Cathedral Bluffs, which is an impressive portion of the bluffs, was the result of continued erosion. In 2017, the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, TRCA, created the Scarborough Waterfront project, which aims to revamp about 11 kilometers of Scarborough Bluffs shoreline, which includes the expansion of the existing beach by approximately 60 meters into Lake Ontario, between Bluffers Park and Meadowcliff. On August 23, 2020, a large portion of the Scarborough Bluffs near Lookout Point collapsed onto a beach, causing explosion-like sounds, followed by a wave of dust. A number of beachgoers were in the area, but there were no reports of injuries in the collapse. Geology. The bluffs run 15 kilometers, 9.3 miles, from the foot of Victoria Park Avenue in the west to the mouth of Highland Creek in the east, reaching as high as 90 meters, 300 feet, the equivalent of 25 stories. However, the escarpment continues westward inland, running between Kingston Road and Queen Street East, pausing over the Doane Valley, and continuing on the north side of Davenport Road. The escarpment forms part of the old shoreline of glacial Lake Iroquois, formed after the last ice age, which left valuable geological records as the part of the escarpment by the lake eroded. The eroded alluvial deposits from the bluffs then settled westward to form the Toronto Islands. The Scarborough Bluffs, also known as the Bluffs, is an escarpment in the Scarborough district of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. There are 9 parks along the bluffs, with Bluffers Park being the only one with a beach. Forming much of the eastern portion of Toronto's waterfront, the Scarborough Bluffs stands above the shoreline of Lake Ontario. At its highest point, the escarpment rises 90 meters, 300 feet, above the coastline and spans a length of 15 kilometers, 9.3 miles. There are 2 registered non-profit community associations in the Scarborough Bluffs area. The Scarborough Bluffs Community Association, which represents the Birch Cliff, Cliffside, and Cliffcrest neighborhoods. The Guildwood Village Community Association, which represents the Guildwood Village neighborhood. Municipal parks on the Scarborough Bluffs includes Bluffers Park, Cathedral Bluffs Park, Chesterton Shores, Crescentwood Park, Cudia Park, East Point Park, Doris McCarthy Trail, Grey Abbey Park, Guild Park and Gardens, Harrison Properties, Port Union Waterfront Park, Rosetta McLean Gardens, Rouge Beach Park, Scarborough Crescent Park, Scarborough Heights Park, South Marine Drive Park, Sylvan Park. Scarborough Beach Park was a lakeside amusement park in the beaches, Toronto from 1907 until 1925. The park was originally in East Toronto until its annexation by the City of Toronto in 1908. Map of East Toronto in 1908, just prior to being annexed to Toronto, showing Scarborough Beach Park on the shore of Lake Ontario. The park operated on a 40-acre site south of Queen Street East to Lake Ontario, between Ludi and Maclean Avenues. It succeeded 2 East End trolley parks, Victoria Park 1878 to 1906, and Monroe Park, 1896 to 1906, which had closed the previous year. The park was founded by Harry and Mabel Dorsey, who purchased the site from the Sisters of St. Joseph for $165,000 in 1906. It has been the site of the Order's House of Providence Farm since the 1890s. The Toronto Railway Company purchased it in 1913 and invested and expanded it, as well as extending the TRC's streetcar network to reach the grounds, making it a trolley park. Previously, Toronto residents had reached the park using a steamship service from the Toronto Harbor at the foot of Yonge Street. The amusement park was built at a cost of $600,000 and opened June 1, 1907. It was modeled on Coney Island's Luna Park and offered over 100 attractions, including various rides such as the Shoot the Chutes water ride, a Tunnel of Love, a roller coaster billed as a scenic train, fun houses, aerial swings. Scarborough Beach Park was a lakeside amusement park in the beaches, Toronto from 1907 until 1925. The park was originally in East Toronto until its annexation by the City of Toronto in 1908. Map of East Toronto in 1908, just prior to being annexed to Toronto, showing Scarborough Beach Park on the shore of Lake Ontario. The park operated on a 40-acre site south of Queen Street East to Lake Ontario between Ludi and Maclean Avenues. It succeeded two East End trolley parks, Victoria Park, 1878 to 1906, and Monroe Park, 1896 to 1906, which had closed the previous year. The park was founded by Harry and Mabel Dorsey, who purchased the site from the Sisters of St. Joseph for $165,000 in 1906. It has been the site of the Order's House of Providence Farm since the 1890s. The Toronto Railway Company purchased it in 1913 and invested and expanded it, as well as extending the TRC's streetcar network to reach the grounds, making it a trolley park. Previously, Toronto residents had reached the park using a steamship service from the Toronto Harbor at the foot of Yonge Street. The amusement park was built at a cost of $600,000 and opened June 1, 1907. It was modeled on Coney Island's Luna Park and offered over 100 attractions, including various rides such as the Shoot the Chutes water ride, a Tunnel of Love, a roller coaster billed as a scenic train, fun houses, aerial swings, an athletic field that hosted sporting events and was the home field for a lacrosse team, and other attractions such as a freak show, daredevil acts, bathing and dance pavilions, band concerts. In 1909, the park was the site of the first public flight in Canada when Charles F. Willard took off from Scarborough Beach Park on September 7, 1909. The park closed for the last time on September 12, 1925, after 19 seasons. The Toronto Railway Company's streetcar franchise with the city had ended in 1921 with the creation of the Toronto Transportation Commission. TRC sold its assets to the city in 1924, but the city refused to include the amusement park in the deal, so it was purchased instead by the Provident Investment Company, which demolished the park and replaced it with a residential subdivision. Scarborough Beach Boulevard in that subdivision is named after the park. Scarborough Beach Park was a lakeside amusement park in the beaches, Toronto from 1907 until 1925. The park was originally in East Toronto until its annexation by the City of Toronto in 1908. Map of East Toronto in 1908, just prior to being annexed to Toronto, showing Scarborough Beach Park on the shore of Lake Ontario. The park operated on a 40-acre site south of Queen Street East to Lake Ontario between Ludi and Maclean Avenues. It succeeded two East End trolley parks, Victoria Park, 1878 to 1906, and Monroe Park, 1896 to 1906, which had closed the previous year. The park was founded by Harry and Mabel Dorsey,